Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are going to be starting Season 3 of What If Issei Was the Ghostwriter? Highschool DxD Flame of Fury, Season 3, Part 1. As always, if you're a fan of Power Core Productions and Podcastings, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Where we last left off with our story, Issei and his company had also come face to face with none other than the devastating Blackheart himself. Blackheart, arriving during the events of the peace treaty at the end of Season 2, showed off how truly devastating his power was, revealing to be behind the Chaos Brigade as well as the one responsible for kidnapping Orifice, the Infinite Dragon, and siphoning her power to feed into the Chaos Brigade. Blackheart got a chance to test against the next generation and to see what they were truly capable of, making work of Irina, the Red Dragon Empress, Vali, the White Dragon Emperor, and even Issei Hyoto, the Ghostwriter. However, Issei, using the power of the boosted gear, being boosted by Irina as a last-ditch effort, tapped into a power known as Crimson Flame, this giving him a brief moment where he was allowed to exchange blows with Blackheart, but ultimately was defeated. However, Blackheart would also need to retreat in the process, as he couldn't afford to fight against all of the faction leaders at once. However, he does vow that he will face them again. As we go into Season 3, we're going to see some major differences than what you would be originally expecting. For this story in particular, I am going to be using the events of the light novel as well as the manga. Granted, I haven't read into it fully, but I am starting to, and I want to borrow elements from those stories rather than using the just anime itself to come up with something more unique and original, as the events that play out in Seasons 3 and 4 are going to be much more different than they were in the original timeline. In this story, we're going to see Issei train and evolve in his powers. We're going to see the House of Grimmery improve, as well as new allies and foes come along the way. But how will this be different from the main story? And what dangers will await our heroes as we go into the events of Season 3? But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. For the Occult Research Club, summer vacation was now upon them. As Rias was making the final preparations for the club to go to the underworld together, where they would be getting a chance to have their own vacation, but as well as getting in some serious training, there were also others who were making new adjustments to their life. For instance, Vali, the White Dragon Emperor, was now trying to get himself situated in his new town and environment, now joining the Occult Research Club as well under order from Azazel. The one thing that he was focused on was the fight that he had against Blackheart. Despite all the strength and the power he had obtained, he was made to look like an absolute fool. Above anything else, even above wanting to fight with the Red Dragon Empress, Vali found a new challenge. One that truly stimulated him. One that he felt was giving him the fight that he had always wanted. It was no longer Issei who wanted a shot at Blackheart. Vali wanted his chance at him as well, and he vowed that next time the outcome would be different. Meanwhile, for Issei, his adventures were still ever present. The one thing he had to say as the Ghost Rider, although he couldn't tell if this was a benefit or not, was that his mission was taking him all over the world. Not only did he have to continue his search for the 99 in Japan, but there were also the wayward and cursed souls all over the world. He traveled to places like Europe, like London, Italy, France. He traveled to countries like Russia. He also traveled to places like India, even going to various parts of the United States, Canada, Mexico, even parts of Africa and South America. For Issei, he was truly a traveling Ghost Rider, seeking vengeance and settling the score for those who had been wronged. All the while doing so, he remained focused on his main task. The fight with Blackheart was burned into his memory. It was a stain on his heart, something that could never go away. When he spoke to Danny, he described having a similar feeling. Blackheart was a being that was the antithesis of everything that the Ghost Rider stood for. It was a being without mercy, without regret. Blackheart literally could not feel such emotions, for it was a being that had no soul. It could not be reaped. There was nothing to redeem. There was nothing to condemn. It was simply a creature that had to be destroyed. Azazel in the meanwhile explained a little more about Volley's past. He also explained what the Four Horsemen were. He would tell them of how he recruited 4 very powerful fighters, each one believing that he had great potential. Of course, he did not turn them all into fallen angels. Of course, they had the option to, but he gave them the choice of what they wanted to do. His 4 horsemen were, in a sense, like his own version of a certain team that could be assembled whenever there were a threat that arose that required their skills and abilities. The others of the Occult Research Club would ask when they would get to meet the other horsemen, and Azazel would promise that they would meet them soon, Volley stating that his team were very capable and skilled, and that while the members of the Occult Research Club weren't bad, they needed a lot of work if they were going to catch up to them as well, and Azazel would agree, all the more so the reason for them to train. Before leaving though, Issei would eventually return back home to Japan. Once he made back home, the girls would greet him, and he was happy to see them all. Of course, as always, he was still getting used to the new home that he was living in, the new mansion. While he did enjoy many of its perks, there were other times when he just locked himself in his own garage, working on his car and adding various utilities and things of that nature, as well as his own training and trying his best to come up with a way to increase his power. And whenever he wasn't doing that, he would spend some nights just standing on the balcony, overlooking the town itself. It was at these moments where from time to time one of the girls would come by and spend time with him. Of them all, it would be Rainier who would join him the most. For Rainier, her life had changed in ways that she could never fully understand. In a sense, she felt a bit unworthy. If it had been in any other situation, her story should have ended a long time ago. But now here she was. She had been given a second chance, a chance to live again, to make a life for herself, to overcome the darkness that was in front of her. And Issei, he was happy. He was happy that he spared her life all that time ago. It could have been so easy. It could have been oh so easy to give in to his vengeance, to take her out once and for all. Maybe he did only spare for selfish reasons. But the more he looked back on it, the more he was happy with the decision that he made. The next day would arrive, and the Occult Research Club would prepare to leave. They would use the Grimmery Dimensional Train to go to the underworld. As they did so, they were also accompanied by Sona, as well as Tsubaki and Saji. They were going to be accompanying them before they were dropped off in the Sea Tree domain. Once that was done, they would continue their journey. Everyone seemed to be happy and in good spirits, although Koneko seemed a bit down, like something was bothering her, but no one really knew what it was, although some had their guesses. Before long, they would arrive to the Grimmery domain, but the train would be frozen in midair. Both Azazel and Rias going to check on things and see what was happening, leaving them in the cart while they went up to the main helm of the train. Everyone was in their seats, not really paying much attention to anything else, thinking that they would have to land eventually. When suddenly the train would disappear and everyone would start falling to the ground itself, although thankfully they were able to stop themselves from crashing into the dirt below. Once they got back up on their feet, they would try to find out what happened to Azazel and Rias, although they wouldn't really have time to do so, as suddenly a large dragon would come out of nowhere, attacking them in the mountainside. With Rias gone, Akeno knew she had to take over as the leader. Leading the charge, she would coordinate everyone into battle. Issei, Volley, Kiba, Zenobia, Koneko, Gasper, Rainier, and Asya would all follow her lead as they fought against the dragon, doing so to great effect. Both Issei and Volley proving to be the true heavy hitters of the team, and they weren't even officially a part of the House of Grimmery. They were just a part of the Occult Research Club, neither one of them having an evil piece. Volley with the power of the White Dragon Emperor using his balance breaker, and Issei turning into his Ghost Rider form. The two of them were definitely the more stronger than anyone else had ever seen, and they were fighting much more motivated than before. The dragon himself even having to get serious and input even more of his power just to stand a chance and hold them down. Before the fight could get too out of hand though, Azazel would arrive with Rias and they would call the whole thing off, as they would explain that the dragon's name was Tanin, and he was actually a former dragon emperor who became a devil and became loyal to the House of Grimmery. They were using the situation as a way to gauge their abilities and see just how strong they were. Azazel had to admit he was impressed with everyone in the way they were able to fight, although he still believed that they could definitely afford to get stronger and do a lot more. Although he would remark that out of everyone here, the ones who had been showing the most potential was both Volley and Issei. After that, as everyone were heading towards the Grimmery Mansion, they would get a chance to meet with Sir Zex once again, as well as meeting Rias' mother and father for dinner. Issei was very surprised by the development of the underworld. It seemed almost like back at home, just, well, in the underworld. It had its own atmosphere, its own artificial sun and moonlight for day and night. All in all, it was a nice place to live, and it wasn't necessarily like the underworld that he had come to suspect. The next day, though, everyone would be gathered together as Azazel would reveal that now was the time to introduce them to the other three members of the Four Horsemen. A summoning circle would appear and everyone would arrive. First would be Biko. He was a descendant of the fighting Buddha Son Goku. The monkey-like warrior would be happy and cheerful to see everyone, as he was flying on a little cloud that he called Nimbus. Next was a young man named Arthur Pendragon. Both Kiba and Zenobia would be in awe having a chance to actually meet someone who was a descendant of the Pendragon family. For you see, Arthur had the lineage from both the legendary King Arthur himself, as well as the witch, Morgan Le Fay. He was also a well-recognized swordsman, who wielded the holy sword, Colbrim, a time-manipulating sword allowing him to travel from various dimensions and other places via teleportation. But finally, there was one member that no one was really expecting. It was a girl, around the same age as Rias and Akino. Her name was Kuroka. Koneko, seeing her face, instantly became filled with anger and dread. For this girl was Koneko's sister, and like Koneko, she too was a master in the sage arts. Koneko would immediately protest. The history between her and her sister was too much, and she didn't trust her at all, although Azazel knew this was coming. Koneko would storm off and Rias would go to check on her. In the meantime, Azazel would give everyone's orders and instructions, and that they would all be breaking up into their own individual training for the next 4 weeks. For Rias, she was going to be studying in the Grimoire Library for battle strategies and how to organize and put a team together, to figure out how to best lead and to use everyone's strengths to her advantage. For Kiba and Zenobia, they were going to be training under Arthur Pendragon, who they recognized as their swordsman superior. For Asya, she was going to be training with her Twilight Healing, learning to heal from a distance. For Gasper, he had training to help get over his fear, and help use his balance breaker. For Vali, along with Biko, they were going to be training under Tanin, the Devil Dragon Emperor. For Koneko, and this was going to be something that would be very difficult for her, she was going to be training with her sister Kuroka. There was also Akano, who was dealing with her own issues, although she would be accompanied by a fellow former fallen angel in Rainier, as the two of them would be training under Akano's father, Barkiel. But as for Issei, his teacher was going to be someone that he didn't expect at all. As another summoning circle of fire would appear, Issei recognized that aura, and out of it stood a man in a tuxedo, his tie loosened and a cigarette in hand, as he took a deep drag. The man being none other than Danny Ketch. He had been contacted by Azazel, and he was here to train up Issei in his Ghost Rider power, since Danny, being the former Ghost Rider, would be the one most suited to train Issei and his abilities. And from there, everyone would split off. For Issei, he and Danny would go to a mountainous range where a large volcano dwelled. For Issei's training, he wanted to try to learn how to tap into that crimson flame form that he used versus Blackheart. Originally, he was only able to do so because Irina, using the boosted gear, boosted his power to the point where he was able to unlock it. However, Danny believed that Issei could obtain this power even without the boosted gear. The boosted gear merely drew out one's potential by blasting it to the max. Basically being, Issei got a taste of what his true power could be, and now he had something to work towards. Johnny wanted Issei to forge himself, to truly put himself under fire and test his limits. That was why they were going to the largest volcano in the underworld. A volcano that was always stewing with hellfire and magma. For sun up to sundown, every day for the next 4 weeks, Issei would be sealed inside of the volcano. He would be under the most intense of heat. A flame so hot that if he couldn't handle it, it would melt the very skin off his flesh. For Issei, he had to train under these intense fires. It was like putting steel inside of a forge. The point of it was to build Issei up, to push him to his absolute limit and make him surpass them. Being inside of that volcano was like being inside of our own personal hell. Temperatures to an extreme so high that even Issei's own Ghost Rider form couldn't protect him. For 12 hours a day, he would be sealed inside of that volcano. And for the other 12 hours at night, he would be outside cooling off. It was a form of forging, if you will. Danny had come up with the idea a while ago. He had done it a few times in his younger years, and he thought that this would be the best way for Issei to draw out his own potential. Issei would do so to the best of his abilities, deep inside of the volcano. He would take heavy boulders and use them as weights. He would punch against the inner sides, where the most dense of the rock was, punching until his knuckles cracked, or oftentimes until he started to bleed out. He would output his flame until he couldn't anymore, trying his best to survive the temperatures. In his Ghost Rider form, he would literally go swimming inside of the magma, feeling it surround him. Issei didn't feel as if he was on fire. He felt like he was pure flame. He didn't even think that you could set fire on fire in the first place, yet that's what it was. And yet, as much as he felt as though he were breaking, he felt he were getting stronger as well. Like all of the pain was only building him up. When Issei wasn't inside of the volcano, he would be recovering on the outside. He had a small little camp set up at the base of the mountain. So when the mountain was unsealed at night, he would go out to his camp and rest. With a lake not too far away, he would wash himself, the cooling water helping to bring down the temperature that was his own body. As he did so one night, he would be sitting at his camp under the light of the full moon, when he noticed someone else walking to the lake as well. It was Koniko. She were also training in the forest area not too far from the volcano itself. As she noticed Issei, the two of them would strike up a conversation. Issei could feel that something was bothering her, and he would talk to her about it. Koniko liked Issei, and she opened up to him about how she felt about training with her sister and how poorly it was going. Her sister wanted her to pull out her own true potential, but it wasn't that easy. Her and her sister had a complicated past, one that Issei would learn for in great detail by Koniko. Learning of her past, Issei understood why Koniko was wary of her sister and her intentions. Even if she had technically changed and tried to turn over a new leaf, she couldn't forgive all of the pain that she had put her through. She then turned to Issei and asked how he could do it. How he was able to forgive right there. Forgive someone who had wronged him so many times, had done so much harm. For Issei, he told her that it wasn't easy. Forgiveness is never easy. And being literally the embodiment of the spirit of vengeance, forgiveness should have been impossible for a man like him. For him, once you were wronged and scorned, there was no going back. Issei had to fight that urge to get vengeance. For many, they thought it was a great power, but sometimes it could actually be a curse. To have restraint. To not seek revenge when you have been rightfully provoked. To learn to turn the other cheek. You could say those very ideals went against everything the Ghost Rider stood for. But yet Issei thought that the Ghost Rider could be something more. Yes, there was a time for vengeance. A time to repay the debt that was owed. Issei didn't disagree with that. But at the same time, he strongly felt that there were other moments where forgiveness was needed. If not for anyone else, but for you. Issei told Koneko if she had to forgive for anyone, it should be for herself, for her own state of mind, for her own inner peace. Koneko would thank Issei for his advice and take it to heart. And after a while, both she and Kuroka, their training would yield results, as Koneko started to accept herself more and more. The sisters were not on good terms, far from it. But maybe, just maybe, things might slowly start to change. As for Issei, he continued on in his training, trying his best to access that crimson flame form. Ultimately, he was unable to do so, and he was very discouraged by this. But Danny, on the other hand, he felt as though Issei had definitely gotten stronger. He could sense it and feel it. His power radiating was a lot more than it had been 4 weeks ago. Even without the crimson form, Issei improved greatly. It was something he was just going to have to work at. Before regrouping with the others though, he did have something he wanted to give Issei as a gift. A special weapon that Issei could use at all times. It was twofold. There were 2 briefcases that he handed to Issei. In the first one, there was a skull-handled dagger. One made especially out of the metals deep within the underworld. A dagger that would not easily be broken, and one that Issei could use for close-range combat. It also had a point at the handle where it could connect to a chain. Every Ghost Rider seemed to use one at some point, and Issei always kept one wrapped around his pants. So the dagger could be connected to the chain and used in short and long-range combat. But inside of the second briefcase was something that he thought would help Issei channel his power. He noticed that Issei liked to use Hellfire blasts, and as such, this weapon was especially akin for that type of technique. It was a specially made shotgun, short barrel. Issei could channel his Hellfire into the shotgun and shoot out concentrated blast of it, like a bullet made out of Hellfire. The more he concentrated and the more he built up the flame, the stronger the blast. Issei was truly grateful for the weapons he had received, and Danny told him he had worked hard and he recognized his talent. He would tell him that he reminded him a lot of Johnny in a lot of ways. The way that they carried themselves and their attitude. As the 2 of them were heading back, he would tell Issei that he had faith in him. If there was anyone capable of bringing down Blackheart, he believed Issei might be the one to do so. And he promised that if that time ever came, he would be there by his side. With Issei's training complete, he would reconvene with everyone back at the Grimmery Mansion. Everyone reuniting and happy to see one another after being apart for a month. Issei could tell that their training had definitely done them some good, and he could see that everyone was really improving and getting stronger. Even Volley looked like he had pushed himself to his limits, and Issei was curious to see what he was capable of. And Volley, he felt the same way. Everyone would go to their rooms and get dressed in their formal attire. The boys putting on their tuxedos and looking presentable, and the girls their dresses as well, as they would all gather together for the great banquet and peace treaty that was going to be taking place. Various deities and factions all coming together to fight as one against the Chaos Brigade and Blackheart's forces. Issei was surprised to see everyone who was gathered together in the underworld, Kiba explaining that there were other mythologies besides the three that Issei had known. There was the Norse mythology, the Persian mythology, the Egyptian mythology, the Greek mythology as well, and so on and so forth. Issei seeing the various other deities all gathered together. It was a sight for sore eyes. However, the one that stood out to him the most was a girl that he knew he recognized. She had come in a white gown, accompanying Michael. He recognized her as Irina, and he walked up towards her, giving her a hug, happy to see her again. Irina was happy also, explaining that she had been attending as Michael's guard, but also Michael had been her teacher over the last month, the two of them training and working hard for her, as she was finally able to get a handle over her sacred gear, the balance breaker boosted gear. And Issei could sense it, as well as Volley, who walked up towards her, greeting her once again as the Red Dragon Empress. Everyone in the room would be in awe for a moment to see the Red Dragon Empress and the White Dragon Emperor together in the same room, as well as the newly famed Ghost Rider, as they heard of his escapades and the many fights that he had been having. For many, this was a new time, one that no one ever thought that they would be in. People of great power all gathered together, not fighting as enemies, but working together to fight against the true evils of the world. As Irina, Issei, and Volley stood together, they all held true to the same vows they had made before, that the next time they came face to face with Blackheart, they would not lose. Just then, another woman would make her way into the room, a woman with long dark hair, wearing a dress made of pure crimson. As she was accompanied arm in arm with Danny Ketch, Issei recognized her instantly as Lady Mephisto. As Lady Mephisto greeted them all, she walked towards Issei, the other girls watching intently and becoming very red hot when Lady Mephisto ran her hand up and down Issei's chest before caressing his face, remarking that she could sense he had gotten very strong over that last month or so, and she wanted to see what he was going to do next. She was surprised that 2/3 of the 99 had already been collected, just a testament to Issei's overall power, although she would make a serious expression for a moment, asking if he were still really going to face Blackheart. After what he had been through the first time, did he truly believe he was up for the task? Issei would look at her determined, telling her that the next time he faced Blackheart, he would be defeated. For Lady Mephisto in that moment, she could see the look in Issei's eyes. It was a look she had recognized from long ago, a look from the man that she had once loved. She remembered that type of look. That look, one of a man who would never give up on his goals, one that would stand true to his convictions. That was the kind of look Lady Mephisto liked to see in her riders, and she would lead him be, telling him that she would put her trust and her faith in him. As well as Lord Michael arriving, also Odin himself would arrive as well, along with his attendant, the Valkyrie Rosvisa, as representatives for Valhalla and Asgard. As everyone had come together, Azazel would get things underway. While the group were also going to be in attendance, Rias' team was also going to be doing security as well, to make sure things went smoothly and there were no unnecessary distractions. In the process, they would end up meeting with Rias' cousin, Syra Org Bale, who was more than happy to introduce himself to the gang. He was especially happy to meet Irina, Issei, and Vali, the Red Dragon Empress, the White Dragon Emperor, and the new Ghost Rider. He had heard of their strength and their power that he appreciated and respected. They had also heard stories of Cyborg Bale as well, a very powerful demon candidate. Despite not having been born with the power of destruction, he was still, amongst many of the devils, one of the more strong and powerful, and someone not to be underestimated at all. For them in that moment, they were in awe of him and his power as well. Especially Vali. He had that look in his eye, like he had found a new opponent, someone he wanted to face in the future. Once the treaty was signed and everything else was taken care of, with that out of the way, Azazel would take a moment to welcome everyone. He would give a speech about the Chaos Brigade, about the peace that they wanted to form with one another. After the last Great War, the 4 former Devil Kings and God himself were killed, and he felt as though this served as a wake-up call for everyone. If they continued fighting and warring with one another, it would only result in their deaths. They would die meaningless, pointless deaths. For him, he wanted to live for a few more millennia, and he felt as though even in this new age and time, peace could be achieved. However, if they were going to do so, then they needed to stand against their true enemy, Blackheart and the Chaos Brigade. They were nothing more but rogue agents who wanted nothing but chaos and destruction themselves. It was going to take all of them working together if they were going to stand a chance to fight for the dreams of the future. He would then call up a few people to the stage. Those like Cyborg Bale, like Rias Grimmery, like Sona Citri, Issei Hyodo, Irina Shido, Vali Lucifer. He would ask them to state their dreams and what they were fighting for. They did, one by one. Many in the crowd were a bit surprised by their dreams, but all the same understood their intent. Azazel would say that these were the dreams of the future, and they were dreams that were worth fighting for and worth protecting. As well as that, there was also something else that he wanted to make an announcement for. An event, a way to show the power of the future. It was something that Azazel, Surzex, and a few others were putting together. You could say it was like an event. If this were pro wrestling, you could say this was like a super card, if you will. An event where you would get to see various matchups, various opponents putting up their skills to the challenge, getting a chance to show what they could do, to show what they were truly made of. This super event was going to be something that the underworld would host, and everyone would be allowed to watch and see. Everyone in the crowd would look on in anticipation as Azazel would announce the matchups for this event. First, there was going to be individual battles. The first individual battle would be Vali Lucifer, the White Dragon Emperor, versus Cyborg Bale of the Bale family in a one-on-one exhibition match. Second, there would be a matchup between the former and current Ghost Riders, that being an Issei Hyodo and Danny Ketch. The people in the crowd were starting to roar in approval. Those two matchups alone sounded like something out of a dream. The White Dragon Emperor fighting against one of the top ranked fighters in the rating game, Cyborg Bale. as well as a battle between the former and the current Ghost Riders in Issei Hyodo and Danny Ketch. Issei and Danny locking eyes with one another in the room. Issei remembering his last fight with Danny, and how Danny easily mopped the floor with him. Even he in that moment was a bit excited at the idea of the challenge, the opportunity to get a rematch against him once again. That was something that truly intrigued him. But finally, Azazel would reveal the main event. It was going to be a rating game. A rating game between Rias Grimmery and the House of Grimmery, and Sona Seatree and the House of Seatree. Both Rias and Sona looking at one another. The two best friends, both from high-ranking devil households, now getting their first opportunity to go up against one another. Both Rias and Sona. The people in the crowd cheered with approval. Everyone excited for the slate of matchups that they were going to be getting in 2 weeks' time. Volley Lucifer versus Cyberorg Bale. Issei Hyodo, the Ghost Rider, versus the former Ghost Rider, Danny Ketch. And finally, an all-out rating game match between two of the future high-ranking members of the Devil community, in Rias Grimmery and her team versus Sona Seatree and her team. As everyone was looking on in approval, excited for what was to come in just 2 weeks' time, within the shadows, there was a group listening on intensely. A young man named Theodore Astaroth was speaking with two people in the darkness, as well as a third. These three individuals. One, the Norse god of mischief Loki. Second, the god of nightmare, Nightmare himself. And finally, Blackheart. They were speaking with Theodore Astaroth, who was feeding them the information of the upcoming plans for the special exhibition event. They had all come together with their own dreams and ambitions. This event would serve as the stages for the Chaos Brigade's next move. Lord Odin was going to be in attendance for this event, and it was going to be on that day that their plans would be put into motion. This event would serve as the assassination for Lord Odin, as well as other members of the great factions. For Loki, starting off the events of the ultimate Ragnarok. For Blackheart, a chance to wipe a few pieces off the board, as well as see what Issei had managed to gain, as he wanted to see just how strong the new Ghost Rider had become as well. And for Theodore Astaroth, there was only one thing he had in mind. A sweet prize he wanted to get his hands on. A young devil girl, a bishop, and her name was Assia Argento. This concludes What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? High School DxD Flame of Fury, Season 3, Part 1. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that is to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, as we are going to be continuing What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? High School DxD Flame of Fury, Season 3, Part 2. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.